A single cup of coffee can change a man's life, but that morning, it changed the fate of a nation. A quiet stillness lingered in the corridors of the presidential palace in Burkina Faso. The distant chirping of birds blended with the soft crackle of radio static from security walkie-talkies. President Ibrahim Traoré, as always, would enjoy his morning coffee in his private room before heading to the emergency cabinet meeting. Black, no sugar, extra foam, same time, same cup, every day. But today, what filled that cup was different. An invisible death was making its way to his lips. No one knew, not yet. One of the president's most trusted men, Minister of the Economy Jean-Baptiste Caboret, had been quietly amassing wealth for months. Behind closed doors with foreign investors, a plan had taken shape. One move to end Traoré's rising popularity, to derail Africa's growing awakening, eliminate the president. The plan was flawless. The poison dissolved completely in hot coffee, undetectable to the eye, the nose, even basic tests. A deadly but traceless compound. As soon as Traoré took a sip, his blood pressure would plummet. Then his heart would stop. No one would suspect foul play. They would call it stress, exhaustion. But that morning, something in the plan went wrong. Mamadou, a palace waiter, was preparing the tray like he always did. He had been there for years, quiet, loyal, invisible. But today, something caught his eye. One cup was slightly different. It steamed gently, but the scent was off. Subtle, sharp, unfamiliar. Mamadou paused. He stared at the cup in his hand. And in that moment, he knew he had to make a decision. But what did he see? What did he feel? And more importantly, why did he switch the cups? There was something off in the kitchen that morning. The chef, usually full of jokes at sunrise, was unusually silent. The assistant cooks avoided eye contact. As Mamadou checked each cup of coffee one by one, he paused at the third one. A thin steam rose as expected, but the smell. There was something metallic in the scent. Faint, sharp, almost chemical. It stung his nose. This one. It's not like the others, he thought. Years ago, during a brief military assignment, Mamadou had received basic chemical training. He never imagined that knowledge would one day save a life. As he prepared to place the cup on the tray, his instincts flared again. The chef's movements, too precise. It was as if he were aligning that one special cup exactly with the president's place setting. Why is he being so deliberate? The tray was prepared, 4 cups, one for President Traoré, one for the Minister of Defense, one for the Interior Minister, and one for Jean-Baptiste. But now, Mamadou had just one question racing through his mind. If this coffee is poisoned, who is it meant for? Was he about to deliver a cup of death with his own hands? What if he was wrong? What if it wasn't poison? But worse, what if he did nothing and the president died? But what if I am right? He didn't have time to answer his doubts. Mamadou made his choice. He quietly switched the cups. The poisoned coffee, meant for Traoré, would now go to Jean-Baptiste instead. Mamadou moved with calm precision. No one noticed. He held the tray steady, even controlled his breathing. His face was expressionless, his steps smooth, but inside a storm was raging. This isn't just coffee, he whispered in his mind. This is life or death. He reached the table. One by one he placed the cups. Then, without a word, he stepped away, as if nothing had happened. He didn't know it yet, but history had just changed forever. The meeting room was dimly lit. A long oak table stretched across the center, lined with coffee cups arranged in a single, precise row. The ministers took their seats. President Ibrahim Traoré sat at the end, directly beneath a shaft of sunlight, sneaking through a gap in the heavy curtains, cutting through the tension like a spotlight. Mamadou cast a glance at the table, then quietly stepped back, leaning against the wall by the door. His heart pounded in his chest. He slipped a hand into his pocket, clenched his trembling fingers into a tight fist. Jean-Baptiste picked up his cup with a faint, fake smile. He paused, then raised it to his lips and drank. In that instant, time stopped. A voice screamed inside Mamadou's head. "Stop! That's your death, you're drinking!" But no, that wasn't his way. This was silent heroism. Within seconds of the first sip, Jean-Baptiste's face began to change. His eyes narrowed, his brow furrowed. He reached for his throat as if something sharp were lodged inside. Then came the coughing, soft at first, then harsher. He clutched his chest, tried to rise, but stumbled. Jean-Baptiste, asked the defense minister, springing to his feet. Suddenly, the entire room erupted into chaos. Security rushed in. President Traoré leapt from his chair. His eyes darted, first to his collapsing minister, then to the coffee cup still steaming on the table. Jean-Baptiste crumpled to the floor. Foam began to gather at the corners of his mouth. His pulse was nearly gone. Traoré knelt beside him, studied his face. Silence filled the room. Then the president stood up. His voice roared through the hall. "This is no accident. This is an assassination attempt." Heads turned. Panic and suspicion spread like wildfire. But in that moment, no one looked at Mamadou. He stood quietly in the back, eyes fixed on the president. He was alive, and in the deepest corner of his mind, Mamadou whispered to himself, "I switched the right cup." When Jean-Baptiste was rushed to the hospital, his heart was still faintly beating. But the look on the doctors' faces said it all. Moments later, a toxicologist stepped in front of the cameras. "We detected a mixture of arsenic and organic neurotoxins in the coffee. This type of poison can only be produced in advanced laboratories." When President Traoré received the report, he spoke a single word: external involvement. The National Security Council was convened immediately. Kitchen staff, palace guards, senior aides, everyone was interrogated. Mamadou remained silent at first. He felt guilty. Admitting that he had switched the cups meant admitting he had tampered with evidence, but deep down, he knew he had saved a life. Late that night, under the president's direct order, Mamadou was summoned again. He sat quietly, head bowed, then finally spoke. "I noticed the scent. That one cup smelled different. The chef's movements were off. I had a feeling, so I made the switch. It was instinct." The room went silent. Moments later, President Traoré entered. Mamadou stood. Their eyes met. The president said nothing, just nodded once. Then he asked, "Do you know who did this?" Mamadou shook his head. "No," but it felt like the order came from above. The next morning, the news broke. Jean-Baptiste had died. Inside his office, an abandoned briefcase was found. Bank records inside showed multi-million-dollar transfers from 3 foreign accounts: Switzerland, Dubai, and Paris. One of the account holders, a fictional company named the Ant Consortium. That was the thread. President Traoré faced the press. "This is not just an attempt on my life. It is a political and economic attack on our nation. But let it be known, Africa is awake, and we will not be broken by a cup of coffee." As microphones clicked off, international headlines followed. Coffee coup attempt in Burkina Faso. Toxic brew uncovers dirty money trail. But one question still lingered in the air. Who was behind the money? The square in front of the palace was packed. Flags waved in the wind, and the crowd grew with every passing second. On social media, one photo had gone viral. President Traoré, hand on the shoulder of a humble palace waiter, looking him straight in the eyes. That man now had a name known across the nation: Mamadou. President Traoré stepped in front of the cameras. Behind him stood ministers. In front of him, the people. He raised his hand and began. "Today I introduce you to a hero. Not a general, not a minister, a waiter." He was silent, but he chose what was right. The crowd erupted in applause. When Mamadou was called to the podium, his head was bowed, but his chest stood tall. The crowd chanted, "Hero! Hero!" His eyes welled with tears. Traoré continued. "While they plotted betrayal behind closed doors, we stood tall before our people. Because our strength does not come from rank, it comes from the heart." As the investigation unfolded, the shell company, the Ant Consortium, was exposed as part of a European-based spy finance network. The same network had infiltrated political systems in other African nations as well. In response, the African Union called for an emergency summit. During the session, Traoré delivered a powerful speech. Toxic money, toxic coffee, toxic alliances. But we have a cure. Unity. What happened in Burkina Faso today could happen in Senegal tomorrow or in Niger next. It's time to wake up. By the end of the summit, major resolutions were adopted. All beverages served to heads of state would be tested in secure labs. A Pan-African financial intelligence network would be established. The moment Mamadou switched the cup was officially declared Africa's turning point. That evening, the president stepped before the cameras one last time. Mamadou stood beside him. Today we didn't just stop an assassination. We sent a message. The people of Africa will no longer remain silent. Then he paused and pointed at Mamadou. This is the people. This is the hero.